Good morning and welcome to the Health, Wellness and Creativity panel. I am Melissa Jimenez, the General Manager of MusicTT and the moderator for this panel. Thank you for joining us for this very candid conversation on the creative sector's evolving approach to mental health and wellness. Today we have a strong panel of women here and an exciting discussion ahead. Joining me is clinical psychologist Dr. Alina Williams, founder of True Growth Caribbean, Miss Letina Mata, and string ensemble teacher at Minnesota Waldorf School and yoga instructor at Yoga for All Musicians, Miss Amanda Rice. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, so diving right into it. So, in your experience, actually, before that, I'll take a tack back. So, let's go around and do a short introduction. We'll start who's at the top. We'll start with Alina.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dr. Williams. I am a clinical psychologist attached to the Scarborough General Hospital, and I have an interest and passion in mental health and mental wellness. I love advocating for mental health and emotional well-being, and I am so excited to be here. I think this is a really important area of exploration for musicians, creatives, and just the industry on a whole. So thank you for having me.
Amanda.
Hi, good morning. I'm Amanda Rice. I am a music teacher. I run my own music school called Legato Music and Yoga. I teach mostly the violin and the ukulele, and I have a strong emphasis in my lessons on breath awareness and performance anxiety awareness. I did my graduate thesis on performance anxiety in college-age musicians, and I also teach yoga once a week online with a yoga studio that you mentioned, Yoga for All Musicians. And I'm also really excited to be here. And I'm now based in Minnesota, I forgot to say, but I'm from Trinidad. I've been here for about 5 years. So
Nice. And Letina.
Hi everyone, I am Letina Mata, the founder of True Growth Caribbean. I'm actually a mindset coach. My background is in psychology, and the purpose of True Growth Caribbean is to be a safe space to bring awareness in terms of health and wellness, inner work and healing. I'm really grateful that I get to be on this panel with these powerhouses of women and for us to have a wonderful discussion about things related to health, wellness, and creativity.
All right. So thank you very much, ladies, for that introduction. And getting right into the meat of the matter, we're about to discuss some of the issues. So, in your experience, what are some of the issues you think that are facing creatives that are the most prevalent?
So we know that the pandemic has upended everyone's lives, and people are, in a position of uncertainty. The future is basically precarious. We aren't sure what to expect. We don't know when the pandemic will end. And so there's so many psychosocial factors facing musicians right now. There is the issue of financial instability because musicians aren't able to perform. Record sales in some instances have dropped. We aren't having live concerts because gathering isn't allowed. A lot of the entertainment industry has experienced a significant decline in its ability to manifest. So that's really important. And on top of financial stability, we have people experiencing an increase in anxiety and depression due to not just the financial instability, but the pandemic in itself, So there is a lot of loneliness that musicians are facing because they're not able to meet and be creative. There's a sense of loss of meaning without the ability to perform. And what we have noticed is that this increase in depression and anxiety is linked to a lot of self-medication. And self-medication is something that is already inherent in the music industry. You know, the term sex, drugs, and rock and roll didn't just appear out of nowhere, right? And so among independent music makers that have experienced negative emotions, there have been an increase in the use of alcohol, marijuana, and even hardcore substances like cocaine. There is what we find a tendency to experience sex addiction, and sex addiction is a way of exerting control over something because we've lost so much control over everything due to the pandemic. And so the sex is a form of release. We have people that are inside more often now. And so it's a way to distract themselves from this sense of emptiness that some musicians face. And, you know, it's important to know that people could have poor mental health without directly having a mental illness. And we know that a lot of musicians are facing issues related to things like lacking quality access to healthcare because they don't have health insurance as a result of being financially unstable. There is, in general, just not being able to work has led to a high percentage questioning whether they made the right choice to enter this industry. And that's something that's important because, you know, when we growing up, we constantly are reinforced with messages about go and be the doctor, go and be the lawyer, be the engineer, you know, things that are perceived as stable and hardy because they could survive through a pandemic. And so musicians really have to step out of the box and choose something that goes against the norm. And when they face a pandemic that is already isolated, there's a tendency to feel, you know, I made the wrong decisions. How am I going to support myself? How am I going to support my family? Should I have chosen something else? Should I have had a backup skill? Should I have developed other areas of my life so that if something like this were to happen, I would be more prepared? And so there's a lot of questioning going on in this time. And that's some of the issues that musicians have had to face, in addition to just the very nature of the job coming to a halt, you know?
Yeah. So do any of the other ladies have any thoughts on the issues being presented?
Yeah, so actually to add to what Alina said, so she mentioned, you know, this questioning that's coming up. So it really probably has highlighted so many limiting beliefs for musicians and creatives who probably weren't very much aware of it in the past when things were, you know, good and they were active and things were happening. But now that there's so much rest during this time, it has certainly highlighted like, OMG, did I make the right decision? Was this something I was supposed to do? And if they aren't aware of how to deal with these limiting stories and these limiting beliefs, it is probably the reason for them using substances in greater capacities, because they're looking for ways to self-soothe, they're looking for ways to find outlets to deal with these limiting stories and things that they would have been conditioned to believe when they were younger, but it's now coming to their forefront during this time of more quiet and rest, you know? So yeah.
I love that Letina refers to it as a time of quiet and rest, because it's a nice shift in perspective, because many people don't see it as a time to rest and reflect. And, you know, for some people, resting creates a sort of uneasiness. They don't like to be at rest. Resting is perceived as being inefficient and unproductive and, you know, like not having any substance or purpose. But the term rest is really reflective of growth, I think. But because it's not perceived that way by many people, that adds definitely to the burden of mental health issues that they may face, because it's seen as a time where they're just not being productive. And that rest isn't seen positively, but it has so many benefits if it's looked at as rest. I like that term, rest.
Agreed, but it also speaks to the conditioning, right? And of course,
Yeah.
in the industry, there's the perception that is always go, go, go. Like you need to be going, you
That's
always need to be
right.
creating, you always need to be bringing out something new, you always need to be doing something. So from that angle, it highlights the conditioning of what it is supposed to be, but whose narrative is that, right? And I guess all of this becomes self-imposed, and as a result, if we don't know, so when I use the word rest, it to me, I also interpret that as a period of self-discovery, right? Because it also highlights, okay, well, what am I doing? Is this something that I really want to pursue, continue to pursue? What could I do differently, etc.? So when I use rest, I also refer to it as, moments of self-discovery as well.
Yeah.
So Amanda, yoga is something that creatives in particular like to use as a means of escape to release their stress and all of that. So do you find anyone coming into the studio, either voicing their opinions about some of the issues that they have going on and using yoga as an outlet?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's affected artists the most in my experience with my students is the loneliness and the lack of community. Because I think one of the best parts of being in a band or performing with other people is that sense of community that you have. And like all the bands I've been in my whole life, we would, get food together and we just go to each other's houses and lime and talk, and we just know it's like being in a relationship with like 5 people. And it's one of the coolest things ever. And I think one thing that all the musicians I've been in touch with really struggle with, that lack of community, and not just the community from their band members or whoever they perform with regularly and practice with, but the community of being on stage and having people happy to hear you play or sing and having that energy exchange, like feeding off of each other. So I found that a lot of people who come to yoga classes are looking mostly for that sense of community, because we tend to talk before and after class, and we, it's an open space where everyone is aware that we're all having a really hard time with the pandemic, and everyone is open to talking about that and sharing their experiences and just having that sense of community, even though it's through the computer with people, all over the world that you may not ever meet in real life. It's really helpful to have that space to talk about the anxiety and depression that all performers are facing right now.
Yeah, and I think that that's very helpful. You see that element to talk. My girlfriends and I was actually talking this weekend about men in particular, that, women have so many outlets. We have our friends, our girlfriends, our mothers, or whoever else to talk to, but men in particular, and far less in the music industry or creative industry in general, they don't have that network of people necessarily to talk to. If they go talk to the boys, they will laugh at them and be like, what stupidness you want, boy? Take them for a joke kind of thing, when, they're really trying to emote what they're feeling, So yeah, I think having that community of persons to talk to is definitely essential for our survival, especially now. So tacking back a bit to one of Alina's comments about reinforcing messages of a backup plan, and COVID, sort of impressing that now on creators. You want to talk a little more about that?
So, what I have met with some musicians over this period of time, and a lot of them would have lamented to me that, I should have chosen a career that was more hardy. That seems to be the recurrent theme, because especially in a society where the musicians already feel like their music sometimes are not valued, or that they're not receiving enough support from the government agencies, for example. So we know that Carnival is a big time for musicians, but outside of that, we don't really see halls being filled sometimes with patrons, and just in general, musicians tend to feel like they constantly have to be fighting and competing and struggling to be able to make their mark. And so what I've found is that a lot of musicians are wondering if they should have had, just backup options. But when they think of backup options, they're mostly talking about, again, the traditional 8 to 4, and very few of them, I guess, in a state of depression too, it's very hard to think about creative opportunities. But very few of them have really thought about, how could I be really creative in this time? And how could I then expand my horizon, not just being a musician, but doing other things, even if it's related to the music industry or outside of the music industry. And so I think when we talk about a backup plan, it doesn't mean that we have that we're reinforcing the message that you made the wrong choice or that you should have chosen something else. But it gives everybody an opportunity to explore, how could I have multiple streams of income, for example? How could I make what I do more sustainable, So it's not that what I'm doing is wrong, but how could I make it more enduring? How could I make it into something that is able to be lasting or long lasting? And so in terms of a backup plan, the term suggests that, maybe they made the wrong choice, but I think it's really about exploring so many different avenues and using this time as a way to, once you hit rock bottom, the only way to go is up, right? And for some people, this pandemic has been rock bottom. So it's now an opportunity for people to think, I wanted to make this move, but I was so afraid in the past, or I was so caught up with my music and performing in the past, but now that I actually have time to reflect, maybe I could explore some other area, or I could do something else that I was interested in. And I think this pandemic presents a great opportunity for that to happen.
I think musicians also get caught up in identifying themselves as musicians. Like if you ask them what they like, tell me something about yourself. Most likely they'll say I'm a musician, or I'm a guitar player, or whatever instrument they play, or I'm a performer. And I think that the pandemic is a great opportunity to for musicians to explore other parts of themselves and try to incorporate that into their revenues and ways of continuing to make a career out of music, because there's so many other things that you can incorporate with music skills. You don't have to just be a performer or just a teacher. You can do so many things. And of course, it's hard to think like that if you're already in a state of anxiety or depression.
That's right.
But it's such a good opportunity to explore other aspects of our personalities and our interests, to incorporate it with us being musicians and performers.
Yeah, I think that highlights that we are actually multifaceted people, right? And during this time, because we were forced, or musicians, creators were forced to become still in terms of who they are and where it is they'd like to go, this actually gives them the opportunity to give themselves permission to explore other parts of themselves, as Amanda said, So paired with the acknowledgement that, okay, these are the beliefs that they have, and these are the things that they thought maybe true, considering what the pandemic has done, and showcasing that, okay, maybe they should have had a backup plan. For those who are able to stay strong and stay firm in terms of what their truth is, as they are not probably destined or meant to be in a 9-to-5 space, but they get to give themselves permission to explore different parts of them and see how it could be integrated into their music and into their creativity, etc., to create something sustainable for themselves. So I love that you said that, Amanda.
And one thing, the music industry is already one that tends to be destabilizing for emotional and mental health well-being. So, when we think about the music industry, we're thinking about being constantly ramped up, because you have to have that sort of energy to perform. You have to be creative, so you're constantly sort of sometimes thinking and thinking and thinking. And in addition to that, the music industry doesn't have a lot of boundaries in place. So you have musicians receiving calls at any hour, it isn't like 8 to 4. So 10 o'clock in the night, 11 o'clock in the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, you have people interacting and engaging you in different things. And we tend to find too that there's a tendency to have poor eating habits, poor sleeping habits during carnival times, for example, musicians are surviving on Red Bull energy drinks because they're just going and going and going. And so I think this is an opportunity not just to look at your financial stability, but to consider ways that you can engage in your mental health consistently, so that in the future, if there were to be other types of incidences like this, that you are more resilient as a person. We tend to ignore our mental health until something dramatic happens. And this is an opportunity for people to consider that their mental health is akin to taking a multivitamin every day. You have to do something every day to constantly be on top of your emotional well-being. And so just because the industry itself is fraught with unstable routines and an unstable lifestyle, I think this is an opportunity for people to examine just what they do as well, not just how much they make or what they're doing with their talent and their passion.
Yeah, so I like that all of you touched on the fact that, it is important for anyone, not even just musicians, but anyone in the creative industry, and people in general, to look at multiple streams of income, look at multiple ways. When you read all those guru books and listen to those podcasts on what you call it, financial freedom and business, etc., they will always, every last one of them say it is very important for you to have multiple streams of income, especially passive income, that doesn't require your input and your being there. Much like the creative industry, where we have to be present, we have to be there, we're on stage, we're doing things. So, it is important for us to have other things, because there are going to be dry spells. This just happens to be a crazy long one.
Yeah.
A roller coaster of a ride. But there are going to be other dry spells outside of a pandemic, which I'm sure they have experienced, and you want to be able to tap into those other sources, live comfortably, and not have to worry about seeing about your family and doing this and providing and this and that. So you want to make sure and have that business mind set up and mind your business, your businesses. Yeah. So as the world explores and opens up to the topic of health and wellness, mental health, it's become clear that the number of artists suffering is staggeringly high. So there was a study done in 2018 by the Music Industry Research Association, which shows that 50% of musicians reported battling symptoms of depression. Compared with that, less than 25% of the general adult population, which is nearly 12%, nearly 12%, reported having suicidal thoughts, which is nearly 4 times that of the general population. And according to another study in 2019 published by the Swedish digital distribution platform Record Union, the numbers are even starker in that they found that 73% of independent musicians have battled stress, anxiety, and depression. And of course, living through this lovely pandemic, as it were, these numbers, I would imagine, have either maintained or become even higher in some cases and across other territories. So, having said all of that, in terms of what those stark figures are looking like, I know IS data is very much an issue for not only Trinidad and Tobago, but the wider Caribbean. It is something that we really, really, really need to work on. So I guess in your own thoughts and experiences with your clients, etc., what are your thoughts regarding these alarming numbers being recorded across the globe?
Okay, so one thing I would like to mention is that there seems to be a link between very early personality factors or childhood factors or even just genetics and entering the music industry. So when you look at, for example, people like Van Gogh, they'll always talk about one of the reasons Van Gogh was so good was because he did have a mental illness, right? And there are several creative people that have been high performers in their field where their mental illness contributed to them being so good. And it's because they were thinking outside the box. They were seeing the world differently from other people. So there seems to be an early experience of having mental health factors play a part in the entrance into musicians. For a lot of musicians, they found that actually becoming musicians were ways that they soothed their early distress that they would have had in childhood, in adolescence. And so music, or even just artists, for example, those who paint, draw, act, this was their way of coping with some of the things that they experience. So there does seem to be early genetic childhood personality factors involved in becoming a musician. Once you become a musician, even if those factors were not present, there are creative pressures, performance anxiety that you constantly experience time and time again. There are some artists that I follow, some are classical artists, and they would say that no matter how many times they've gone and performed in front of a crowd, every time they have to perform, they still feel scared, they still feel nervous, they still have thoughts of, I'm gonna fail, I'm not gonna do good, the people aren't going to enjoy my performances. So there's constant anxiety about performing. There's the pressure to constantly deliver to your agents, deliver to your fans, deliver to your family, deliver to those that follow you on social media. So there's pressure there. As Amanda would have mentioned, there is your identity being tied to this thing. And then, of course, there is this sense of imposter syndrome that some musicians have, They feel like if they're a fraud, that they're fake, that they're not really good, and that people are just maybe patronizing them for patronizing them's sake. And they go through a lot of self-doubt about their own music and their own creative process. The music industry is, of course, rife with drugs and alcohol. And so once you are surrounded by people that are using drugs and alcohol, you would feel pressure in some sense to use it as well. And so the industry is set up in a way where it honestly makes it very easy to suffer with mental illnesses if you aren't very careful. And that's why these figures are so high, That's why suicide, for example, among musicians is something that's very high in the UK. And there are bands that travel with their own psychologists when they have to do tours, just because they know how destabilizing the process can be and the experience. So it's not surprising that those are the figures that you would have pulled up in your own research, but even anecdotally in my own conversations with musicians, I see the same thing, There's a lot of pressure to perform, there's a lot of pressure to be creative. Dry spells are very difficult to overcome because they personalize it, and it's taken to mean that they are a failure, that they're not good in their art or in their industry. They're surrounded by people that are encouraging them not to go and see a therapist or not to go and talk, but, just smoke this and you'll be all right. Just use this and you'll be good. Quick fix. And so musicians, artists, creatives need to be, very mindful of how the industry impacts them, and they need to develop what I call protective factors to ensure that they don't succumb to the pitfalls that face the industry.
To add to that, I think having a personal level of self-awareness really matters as well, because, of course, as you mentioned, this is something that they would have been, would have a certain mental things would have allowed them to be drawn to music, etc. But even when you come into the industry, it's one thing to be mentored and to be coached and to see what it is, but it's also a completely different thing to have your own personal level of self-awareness in terms of where you are mentally and emotionally, what you could take, what you can't take, set boundaries for yourself, etc. And so I think priority for anybody in the creative space, music industry, or any industry that is fast-paced as this is to prioritize their emotional well-being. Because one of the things that I think a lot of people aren't aware of is to actually feel their emotions. So as a creative, as a musician, as an artist, or whatever the case is, there is this disconnect in terms of feeling what it is you actually feel and validating it. Because if you give yourself permission to feel those things and validate it, then you would then go out and get the support that you need to make yourself feel better and to do different things,
And, Melissa, as Letina spoke about that, I was reading just up to this morning that in an ideal situation, that would be good, where your personality and your own level of individuality and identity is supported and validated by the team around you. But there are instances of many musicians talking about them having to change who they are or what they wanted in order to fit with what society wanted or what the industry wanted. I don't know if any of you all have had an opportunity to look at the series on Selena on Netflix. But that's just one example of how she had to keep changing who she was. You know, she had to fight all the time with her father, with her family to maintain her identity. But Whitney Houston spoke about being forced to sing for white people, and then she was booed off the stage at one of the events because the African Americans felt like she sold herself out. Artists like Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera, they constantly spoke about how they were trying to emerge as their own person, but that their record label would constantly tell them, this is what you have to sing, this is what you have to perform, this is what you have to wear, this is what, and they're constantly being told what to do because it's what the fans want. So there is going to constantly be this sense of struggle for artists, especially those that really make it. In trying to keep their individuality, but at the same time trying to please a group of people that are more interested in the earning potential of the artists. And sometimes you find that those two things sync, and that's great. But other times you find that there's a complete disconnect between what the artist wants and what the record label or the team wants. And in times like that, it could be really difficult on artists to choose mental health over being financially stable or over the opportunities to experience fame and fortune,
And that is so ironic, right? That to me is so ironic because creatives, their values, their pillars are authenticity and freedom and uniqueness and just being true to themselves. And then they have to deal with the conditioning of, as you mentioned, their team and the management and the agency based on, money and what it is they believe society wants, etc. But I mean, I don't know, like I just bring reference to Marshall Montano. I don't know his story per se, but I actually observed his own transition in terms of his music and the way he communicates, etc. And he's on this new level of consciousness and self-awareness. And from that, all I don't know the backstory. To me, it seems as though he has given himself permission to stand true in terms of who he is as an artist and who he is and who he is evolving into as an artist and a business owner, etc. And I feel like that level of self-awareness, once harnessed, once having the right
But
support team,
Latina,
and
I wonder
yeah,
if he was able to do that because he's so established, because the time period
right,
of this emergence really happened when he already made it. Marshall made it
right,
a while now.
agreed.
But for younger artists, I wonder if they would have that sense of boldness. They might be
Mm,
self-aware and they might know that I'm performing in a way that's not authentic to me, but this is what the agency says, and I'm tied to them at this point in time. And
right.
so it might be more difficult for them to make bold decisions like that when they're just trying to get their name out. They just want people to start talking about them first, and then they could probably break out if they have that support.
Agreed.
But
I
at the end
totally
of the day,
agree.
yeah, they need support for sure.
Yeah.
Artists, musicians, they need to be supported to be and feel comfortable to be able to
Hmm.
do that.
And I mean, having expanders, like just using Marshall and being able to see his growth and see his transition, having expanders matter, right? I mean, you could only go as far as you've seen, and having putting yourself, if it's not in a physical space, but just globally, internationally, YouTube, podcast, whatever, connecting with other or learning from other musicians and other people who you see are standing in their truth is probably a very supportive way to help navigate this space, especially if they're now starting out. Because at the end of the day, I think one of the greatest disconnects and one of the greatest disconnects that you could give to yourself is to not do what is true to you. But as you said, because you have no choice in terms of trying to abide by what the agent is asking for, etc., it does contribute to that mental health issue as well. Because you want to do one thing and you're doing something else and it just doesn't feel right at a core level. But this is what we have to do in order to,
Yeah.
get our name out there. And it does contribute to that mental health issue.
All right. So in preparation for this panel, I was reading an article citing Dr. Newman. Yes, Dr. Newman, who is a Toronto-based clinical psychologist, and his private practice focuses on performers and touring artists. So where he says, which sort of encapsulate a lot of what you all said there just now, creatives in the industry today suffer more because their routines are so destabilized. The intense long hours on the road or in the studio create a challenge in maintaining health routines and healthy relationship routines. It's the perfect collision for a breakdown. And
Wow.
while top tier musicians aren't immune to these problems, they tend not to be the ones hardest hit, at least, especially when it comes to financial and healthcare issues. So he went on to say that for every artist that stands on stage, there are 10 to 100 crew members invisible to the public who make that performance, tour, album run, and that those crew members all burn out the same way as the artist, but that people generally don't have, recognition or heartfeltedness towards them for that. So I thought that to be really, really profound, and everything that you all just spoke about there tied into that so well. And I think some of the other contributing factors, for the local creatives in particular, you're talking about artists right now who have no choice but to tour more and more to try and make up the money. So you see borders open, whoosh, everybody, boom,
Yeah.
disappear, they're gone.
Yeah.
Um, everybody, you go on Instagram right now, somewhere, some part of the world, trying to, make back that moolah that they lost. Um, are there any other contributing factors specifically that you think uh, attacking or being imposed upon our artists now, or creatives in general?
No, I just think right now the options are so limited, and because artists are facing so much uncertainty, that it's very difficult. They can't plan, and that's not very typical of people in this industry. They have a calendar for every season, every phase. They know when they're going to Miami, Florida, when they're performing here, doing this. And with the pandemic, with things being so unstable and uncertain, it's very difficult to plan. And I think that in general has caused them to feel a sense of, like if they've been halted in some way. And so I think in we've covered a lot of what contributes to mental decline. But I would like to add that these things can also be used as strengths. And whenever there's a crisis, there's always the opportunity for growth and the development of resiliency. And that's something that I like to encourage a lot, because we all have the ability to be resilient, and we all have the ability to learn from situations. It's something that I tell my clients, my patients all the time. I always say, when something happens, repeat to yourself that this happened for you and not to you. Because when you say this happened for me, you immediately start looking for the benefits of the situation. Your mind starts to search with the ways that you have gained from this thing. But once you say, this is happening to me, then you start to feel a sense of being a victim to your circumstance. You already do have control, and that sense of being disempowered could foster this sense of learned helplessness where you remain stuck. But when you say this is happening for me, you start to question, what can I gain from this? What can I learn? What can I do? How could I move forward from this experience?
Exactly. So I like that. And with that, we can move seamlessly into the tips, because we've covered the issues, we've covered the groundwork in terms of our approach and mentality to mental health and wellness. as well as the contributing factors. So now we're going to move forward into some actionable tips and demonstrations, yoga demonstrations. I'm excited to see that. As to what creatives can do to help navigate these issues. So, Amanda, do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. So I was thinking we could do a couple of yoga breathing techniques, not so much with movement, but just with focusing on our breath. The first one is called the 3-part breath. I'll guide you through a few of them. For this breath, bring one hand onto your belly and one hand onto your chest. And it's called 3-part breath because we breathe into our belly, ribcage, and chest. And we'll breathe in through our nose and out through our mouth. Take a big breath in all the way down into your belly, your ribcage, your chest. And exhale from your chest, ribcage, belly. Inhale down into your belly, ribcage, chest. Exhale from your chest, ribcage, and belly. We'll do one more together. Deep breath in into your belly, ribcage, chest. Exhale from your chest, ribcage, and belly. You can release your hands whenever you'd like. So this breath is really helpful if you suffer from panic attacks or any kind of anxiety, no matter how intense. It really helps with grounding you in the moment, brings more oxygen into your blood, and helps you focus on what's happening physically, because when we have panic attacks or a lot of anxiety happening, we're just caught up in our heads and not with what's really happening. So focusing on the breath is one of the best and fastest ways to calm you down and bring you back into the moment. Another type of breath is called samavriti, or equal part breath. And for this breath, you can imagine a shape. We'll start off with a circle, and we'll try the same. We're going to combine the 3-part and the samavriti breath. So we'll do that breathing into our belly, ribcage, and chest. But this time, imagine a circle so that we're making our inhales exactly the same length as our exhales. And if you'd like, you can trace a circle on the table in front of you. You can use a pencil with paper if you're more of a visual person, or you can close your eyes and just imagine the circle. So I'll trace one in the air just so you can see. Take a big breath in for the count of 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's making the breath exactly the same for your inhale and exhale. Another version of samavriti is the square breathing, where you inhale and then you hold the breath, exhale, and then hold the breath. And this one is really, really helpful as well for anxiety and panic attacks. And when you hold the breath, try not to think of like gasping for air, but think of like just pausing the breath right in your chest. So not breathing in or just like pressing a pause button. And you can do the same thing. You can try tracing in the air, on a table, with paper, anything you'd like. I'll guide you through just 2 of those. Take a big breath in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Inhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. When I do this one, I like to literally count it on my fingers because it helps me have that visual. And you can speed it up or slow it down as much as you'd like to. And then there's one more type of breathing that is also very helpful for anxiety, for calming nerves before performing. When I did my thesis on performance anxiety, this is the breathing technique I taught my participants. And they all, at the end, when we had our review of the study, they all said it was one of the most helpful things for them. This one is called alternate nostril breathing, or Nadi Shodhana. So for this one, bring your right thumb to your right nostril and your right ring finger to your left nostril. And we're going to be breathing in and out through one nostril at a time. Plug your right nostril with your thumb. Breathe in through your left nostril. Hold both closed. Exhale through your right nostril. Inhale through the right nostril. Hold both closed. Exhale through the left. We'll do a couple more. Still think of sending your breath deep into your belly. Inhale through the left. Hold both closed. Exhale through the right. Inhale through the right. Close. And exhale through the left. You can release your hand whenever you're ready. And if you're someone who might have the opposite problem where you feel like you need to get more ramped up before you perform, you can do, which I don't know anyone who's like that, but there may be some people somewhere. You can do the opposite. You can start on the right and finish on the left. So it's considered a cooling breath when you start on the left. It balances your energy channels. And if you want to kind of get your energy more pumped up, maybe if you're like really tired and you have to go to work, you can try the opposite, starting on the right and ending on the left.
Thank you for that. So I am definitely going to be using those techniques because I do suffer from anxiety, so and panic attacks. So when things get really, really badly, and I, have to be like, okay, I do this one. I didn't know about the others. So thank you. That is really, really going to help me, and I'm sure other persons out there. I remembered in our pre-discussions, as you said, amped up, you mentioned that there were things that people can do to sort of have a balance between the amped up and amped down. You can elaborate a little more on that if you remember what I'm referring to.
Yes, I do. So you can actually, depending on how intense your performance anxiety is, or if you depending on how amped up your energy feels, you can do any of those breaths. And the most important thing is to just keep checking in with yourself and asking yourself how you're feeling, because anxiety, of course, it manifests psychologically with our thoughts, but it also manifests in our bodies. So when you're doing those breathing exercises, you can, check in with like your shoulders every time, or your hips, wherever you feel like you hold most tension. Everyone's body's different. For most musicians, it seems like shoulders and our jaw. We clench our jaws a lot. So you can keep checking in with those body parts to know when you feel like a comfortable level, but not like so relaxed that you feel like you could fall asleep, because that would not be good either. So I think it's a lot of the self-awareness that we talked about. It's just constantly asking yourself, how do I feel? How do I feel? Is this where I want to get to? So that you have that optimal state of arousal where you're not so worked up that you can't perform, but not so calm that you don't feel like you can really give anything of yourself on stage.
So do any of those breaths that you taught us constitutes as deep breathing?
Yes, definitely. The first one, the 3-part breath, is considered deep breathing because you're using all of your apparatus for breathing in that exercise. And the really cool thing I like most about these breathing techniques is that you can layer them. So you don't have to do just the 3-part breath. You can do the 3-part breath and the circular breathing, or you can do 3-part breath and the alternate nostril. So it depends on how long you want the breath to be. Like I have asthma, and when I first tried to do the equal part breath, it was really challenging for me to get to the count of 4. So I would just do to the count of 2 really short breaths. And as I practiced more and got my lungs stronger, I can do longer counts. So it really depends on the person.
So you actually touched on the reason why I was asking that, because as a singer, when I went through vocal training, of course, that's one of the first things that they tackle, your breathing, right? They make you run up a hill, run down a hill, do all sorts of different things to make sure that you could build that lung capacity. And I remember one of the starting things that they would have us do is to do deep breathing, right? And the warnings, the warning label that came with that was to be careful when doing it because you can faint. So, a mechanism that I guess that they put in place so that wouldn't happen, or at least you'll be down on the ground already when you're doing it, was for us to lie down on the floor, flat on our back, and then use a telephone directory. But who uses telephone directories anymore? um, but get a telephone directory and place it on your diaphragm. And then you do the deep breathing, lying on your back, flat on the floor, so that in the event that you feel lightheaded or anything, that you just stop. So I was just wondering when I asked that if there were like any stop mechanisms or some early, if you're a beginner, certain things that you would do differently.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I like a lot about these breathing techniques is that you can do them in any position. You can, like, if you suffer from panic attacks, which I've had many of in my life, you can do them no matter where you are, what position you're in. Even if you just do like 2 of them, they help so much, and you can absolutely start laying on your back. Even if you do it every day, there's really no wrong position to do it in. You just want to make sure that your spine is erect. So you definitely don't want to like pull forward or crouch over or be like hunched at your desk. You want to have if you're sitting up or standing, you want to have your shoulders stacked over your hips, which is just general alignment, best posture for your back. And if you're laying flat on your back, you want to make sure that your whole, that your spine is, not curved one way or the other, as straight as possible. And you can definitely have a support on your stomach to help you if you don't want to like put your hands on your body. That's one thing I teach with yoga for children. They have like a breath buddy, like a stuffed animal or something that they are close to, that they put on their bellies to help them see it rise and fall with their breath.
I find this so fascinating. I love breath work and things to do with breathing. And the reason I do is because initially I didn't take to it at all. And you remember I mentioned that most times by the time people come to see me, they are already in crisis mode. They're already in a high state of arousal. They're panicking or distraught. And when I introduced breath work to them, or deep breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, things like that, they would say, well, doc, I'm going through XYZ and you're asking me to sit down here and breathe. Like, that's not going to help me. And there was a point in time when I tried it, and what happened is I started to hyperventilate, and I think I wasn't getting the holding breath right. So, Melissa, you mentioned feeling to faint. For me, it was the opposite. I used to eventually like run out of breath and then start to hyperventilate. So one day I decided, I'm really going to try this thing seriously, and I'm going to make a commitment to do it every day. And what I found is that this is something that we need to practice constantly. You have to master these things when you are in a good place, in a normal state of arousal, so that when you do enter a situation where you're having a panic attack or you feel extremely aroused or extremely anxious, it's easier to implement and incorporate these strategies. And I must say, as an initial non-believer, I feel like we're having a vaccine debate, but as an initial non-believer, it works. It really, really does work. So just for people that might be listening and might be telling them their own selves right now, oh, doing this isn't going to help me in any way. This is not going to help me through the pandemic. It would, breath work is so important. It really helps to stabilize you. And so I am so happy that Amanda spoke about this. And I didn't even know about the alternate nostril techniques. I'm going to start practicing that now myself. But it does work. It's so good. But you really have to start practicing it when you're in a good place, and when you're not highly aroused, so that when situations come up, you feel like, yes, I could master this. I could implement this tool, and it works really well for me, because it's a very good tool, I find, to help manage anxiety.
Alina, you said something there in terms of practice when it's in a good state. So I do something called revelation breathwork, and I call myself a breather for about a year now. And I facilitate revelation breathwork, and it's more of a reconnect to your body type of thing. Very good for releasing emotions, painful emotions, and helping you get clarity of thoughts, etc. But as you said, when somebody's in a state of stress, you can't say breathe. They're looking at you like you're crazy, right? They're like, no, I don't want to breathe. And so
and deep breathe too, right?
And then deep breathe, right? But to speak to that, I think the process of reparenting, which is to give yourself what it is you need in small doses every single day, a little by little. So even if you just start with your breath work for less than 10 minutes, like that is something that you could start doing first thing in the morning or last thing in the night before you sleep. If you just have to journal 2 lines in the first thing in the morning or during the day, but just little things to reparent yourself when you're in a relatively good state of mind, so that when you are in that space of arousal and panic, etc., you have tools that you could utilize. Because the worst thing is to tell somebody breathe when they want to lose their bearings, right? Or to
Yeah.
journal when they want to just go off the handle. Like, you can't tell somebody do that in that space.
That's
So,
like telling a woman to relax, right? Just relax.
right. So yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that practicing. I call that reparenting, giving yourself what you need and just taking little by little every day, because it's a muscle that you build by implementing and practicing these tools daily.
Yes, and I love that you both brought up the importance of practicing, because I think that focusing on your breath and getting in touch with how you're feeling is as important as practicing your instrument for musicians, and as important as eating and as sleeping. It's like, if you can make it just part of your routine, it makes such a huge difference. And I also did not enjoy breathwork at all when I first started it, but I did my yoga teacher training about a year and a half ago, and that's when I really saw the benefits of it. And even if you don't want to do 5 minutes, you can just take 3 deep breaths every morning when you wake up, and it makes such a huge difference.
And there's in terms of contributing to the actionable tips, one that I always stood out and I remembered. I practiced drama when I was younger, and I was also part of a musical production company, doing musical theater and stuff. And one of the producers would always say to all of the persons, whether it be the singers, the actors, the dancers, the whoever, that when you're coming onto the stage, you're creating this persona that people want to see. You're taking on a character. You're learning this character. And you're emulating their traits on a stage. And one of the important things that we need to do when we as actors, actresses, even dancers, you go onto a stage, you must be able to release that character after. Because, as I say, you take on all of this. So imagine you're playing a drug addict, and you had to do extensive research before in terms of how this person acts, what do they do, what do they eat. You're creating this persona, right? This character, and you have to live this person on stage to make it believable. You want to at the end of every production to then consciously make an effort to release that character and leave them there. Because that does contribute to things up there starting to go a little bit haywire, as we have seen with a lot of Hollywood stars already. We heard the stories about a lot of them. Jim Carrey is the most notable one. So yeah, that's just one.
Even Robin Williams.
And Robin Williams, correct. So that is just one tip out there that I really, really wanted to impress on people, because it's something that I've never forgotten. So every time I have to go on that stage, it's like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is who I am right now. You turn on that personality and then switch it right back off. Yeah. Do any of you have any other actionable tips that would be useful for our audience?
I'm an advocate for journaling and affirmations. So in terms of affirmations specifically, having that mantra, that one quote, if it's a verse from the Bible, if it's something that's, a favorite quote, just something that you could ground yourself in, so that you could, connect to yourself, connect to something bigger than you, to help you realize, hey, I'm good, I'm safe. I think a good one to say is, I'm safe. It's safe to be here. It's safe to do this type of work. And something else that I also recommend to my clients is having a feelings box. So when it comes to like anxiety and, dealing with overwhelming emotions and finding yourself dissociating, having things that you enjoy that you could that appeals to all your senses. So if you have something that's your favorite scent, have a candle, something that you could smell, favorite texture, favorite thing to look at, favorite color. So I call it a feelings box. Some clients actually have a box that they may go to. And then for me, I don't have a box. I just have different things around that I would carry or have nearby if I feel my anxiety coming on. So I might have an inhale of my favorite candle or certain texture. So I like plush. So I would have like some plush. So just different things. We don't advocate for the food in terms of food because we don't want to have that dependency in terms of using food as your grounding mechanism. But in terms of eyes, eye sense, or the other senses, our other senses, are definitely having something like that to ground yourself I think is a good, easy technique to have when you feel that anxiety or that pressure coming on. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think two other points that I can add is, just to take time to connect with people who are supportive and positive. You do need positive people around you in this lifetime, especially now, as well as unplug to reconnect. This lovely social media world that we live in, um, it does wonders for us. It does wonders for our business, but at the same time, it can carry us down a road of complete insanity sometimes. So, recognizing when you need to just unplug. We recently had that experience with one of our spotlight artists, and she called us and she was like, yo, I need to disconnect from the world for a moment. She said, because I'm having a really, really hard time right now, just living and being. It wasn't a matter of her being suicidal or anything like that, but she just needed to stop. She was just going, trying to, maintain that presence and in this virtual world. And it got to a point where she just needed to stop. So I commend her for that. I was like, you need to unplug, you do what you need to do. Because at the end of the day, as I tell everybody, if you die today or tomorrow, they will just say Melissa was a nice child. Put some flowers on your grave, sing a happy song, and say, all right, that was it. On to the next person to replace her. So you need to take care of you, right?
Yeah, definitely. And as you mentioned, relying on social support, there's an interesting study done that showed that being lonely or withdrawn from people is equivalent to smoking 14 cigarettes a day. I usually tell people just go and look it up. If you put in Google loneliness and cigarettes, the study comes up immediately. But they found that the effects of loneliness and withdrawing from social support has a really detrimental effect on your physical and mental health. And so we are social beings. We're meant to be social. This isn't to say that you have to go and tell everybody your business or be extroverted, but it means that, you have to rely on your stability rocks. And most times those are the close people next to you that could encourage you, motivate you, even reinforce the affirmations that Letina spoke about when you yourself no longer believe them. And another thing that works for me is to have an attitude of gratitude. Every day I'm constantly thanking God or thanking someone or just acknowledging the things that I'm grateful for. And it's simple things, but when you look at these simple things and how much they add up. So it's something, thankful that I get to go to work. I'm thankful that I have my 2 feet I could walk. I'm thankful that, I'm able to speak. Just small things. I'm thankful for the sheet I'm able to sleep on. I'm thankful that I have a fan or a working AC unit, because the place is so hot these days too. And so I'm always saying, thank you. And that really helps to lift my mood. Even on the days that may feel hard, I'm like, what could I be thankful for in this situation? So if I'm stuck in traffic, and yes, Tobago doesn't really have traffic, but if it takes me 20 minutes to get to the hospital as opposed to 12, that's traffic for me. And I would have to tell myself, I'm thankful that I have a car. I'm thankful that I'm able to drive. I'm thankful. Just small things, practicing gratitude really gets you out of a funk sometimes.
Yeah, gratitude opens us up to the flow of abundance. So I love that you mentioned that. And just to speak to the space of support, I always say that safety is the treatment. So, we may have family and we will have friends, and sometimes those same family and friends may not be as supportive as we would like them to be. So, I think another tip is to release the expectation that they have to support, that they have to believe in what it is you're doing, and find a safe space in order for you to grow and expand and to have the validation and um the proof that what you are doing is true, is real, is possible, right? Not saying that you need to look to other people for validation, but in terms of that support system, it needs to be safe. So even release the expectation that family and friends need to support you and believe in what it is you're doing, but prioritize finding safety in terms of people who could say, yes, I agree, we could do this, let's do this. So that is a big one in terms of support.
Correct. And in the 10 minutes that we have left, let's look at some resources that people can tap into, as well as cover any of the projects that you're working on right now. So, in terms of resources, what do where would you send people to get more information about mental health, wellness, creativity, etc.?
So I think in general, the Ministry of Health has an umbrella arm that deals specifically with mental health. And I think that all the RHAs have a wellness center or at least a mental health department. So people can access services there. And, going to seek mental health services is not an implication that you are mentally ill, right? I want to reinforce that. As I said before, you can have poor mental health without having a mental illness. But sometimes it's not even that you have poor mental health. Sometimes, as Letina mentioned, you need a safe space in order to process things that are happening to you in terms of the pandemic and things that you're going through. So the RHAs have various health centers as well that offer mental health support services. And I know that there are different areas as well in Tobago that have NGO support. So even if you aren't experiencing something directly related to the pandemic, if you've experienced a prior mental health condition, you could receive support there. So, there's the trauma center, there's the suicide hotline, there's Lifeline, there's Families in Action, there are these types of NGOs that you could work with to support you through what is happening. In Tobago here, we have the Division of Health, Family and Wellness, and so they place a lot of emphasis on your holistic well-being, but there's also a mediation center to help you mediate things in your external circumstances that might be affecting you in terms of your emotional and mental health well-being. So that's also a very good option that you could seek. And of course, there are many people doing private practice across Trinidad and Tobago, so that's an option. Instagram has a lot of resources available where you could just have a feel for different people that are doing things, because sometimes you don't need a therapist per se or a psychiatrist. Sometimes what you need is a coach or more of a mentor. And so you could, find the resources that you click with. That's the most important thing, finding something that works for you as opposed to just trying to fit into what you think needs to be done. And then there are other types of services available. Like, I could only speak for Tobago, but we have here like healing with horses, where you do the therapeutic work, but it's not like in an office on a couch. You're out there with animals, and the healing happens through your interactions with them. And then we have different studios here in Tobago that focuses on dance therapy, movement therapy, yoga, as well as, well, with the current restrictions, I know that the aqua sports are not allowed, but there's also that available once it opens up, of course. And so just being able to move your body, being able to be outside, being able to be engaged in different areas, that in itself is therapeutic. So yeah, find out what's out there. in terms of what meets your needs and engage with it. Now is the time to be bold. So if you've been putting things off in terms of taking care of your mental health, go for it now.
And I'd definitely like to add to that, if you're looking for a more, I guess, musical outlet in terms of the therapy, and there's the Music Therapy Association of Trinidad and Tobago. There's also Solary Center for Music Therapy, which is owned by Martina Chow. And on MusicTT's website, we've uploaded 2 booklets. One that was published by the Music Industry Therapists Collective, which gives an outline to mental health best practices, as well as a publication from the Association for Electronic Music. So if you visit MusicTT's resources page on our website, that will be amongst the barrage of resources that are available to you. Is there anything else on the tips that anyone wanted to add?
There's an app that I use called Insight Timer that has hundreds, thousands of free meditations for anything you could think of. If you have trouble falling asleep, you can just type in sleep and you'll find hundreds of them. And also the studio that I teach with, Yoga for All Musicians, has free classes every Sunday. And the great thing about doing yoga online is that you don't have to put your camera on if you feel nervous or don't want anyone to see you. You know, you can do it in your pajamas. And that is at 5:30 every Sunday, and it's taught by rotating teachers, usually by the owners of the studio. Their website is yogaforallmusicians.com if you want to check that out. And they also do meditation and breathwork classes as well.
Okay.
5:30 a.m. or p.m.?
PM.
p.m. Okay.
Thanks for asking.
What time zone is that?
That's for Trinidad.
Okay.
Yeah.
So American Standard Time for those who are viewing from other parts of the world.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Sorry, you wanted to say something?
Oh, no, I was just going to add, don't be afraid to utilize the school, the University of YouTube, and, free resources, Google, podcasts, those type of things. Because, I mean, everything we have is basically by touch of a finger on our phone. So, in terms of your health and wellness, it's really easy to just start by, asking a question, typing in on Google, YouTube, using different resources just to start little by little, as you mentioned before, like little shifts add up to a massive shift over time. And if we just start implementing just daily little things, it does support in a big way. So don't be shy in terms of, looking at those avenues as well to start. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so for our closing statements, we'd like to learn more about any projects that you'll have coming up or anything you're working on right now. I know some of you mentioned that you have lives that you do, as well as your journaling sessions and your sip and paint, is it?
Sip and color, we adult color.
Right. So yeah, I'm gonna hush on that front, and I'll leave you all to talk about your projects.
Sure. So starting next week, we have journaling live sessions every Monday. You can find that on Instagram and YouTube. And then we have sip and colors on a Friday. So adult sip and color. So, I mean, some people sip, some people eat, but you come with your coloring book and we color. So that is really great for winding down at the end of a week. Journaling is with the intention to set powerful intentions for the week. I have officially started breathwork sessions, and this breathwork is actually paired with music. So for the creatives and the musical people, of course, and all the musicians, it's called Revelation Breathwork. It's been a huge game changer. So you could also come and check that out. So you can find all this information on my website, truegrowthcaribbean.com or latinamatter.com. And you have a podcast that you could find on all streaming platforms. True Growth, Through Growth. That's such a interesting play on words. And you get all the resources that you need there in terms of reparenting, mental health and wellness, and just inner work and healing to support you as you navigate life.
Amanda?
my only recurring thing that I do weekly is I teach yoga online every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. American Standard Time. Yoga for musicians, that is.
And they can just find that from the website, right? The website is yogaformusicians.com.
Yoga for all musicians.
Yogaforallmusicians.com, right?
Yep,
Just making sure it's not
right.
a .org. All right. Yeah. Alina?
So currently, a lot of my projects are more so for people that are experiencing severe mental illness, and that's happening in Tobago. My online social media presence is really sometime-ish, especially because I have a newborn right now. But I do post a lot about mental health. As I say, I'm a big advocate for mental health and well-being in general. And so I do share a lot of tips about managing emotions, what we call emotion regulation, managing grief, because I find grief is something that a lot of people struggle to process and to overcome. And I do talk a lot about anxiety and depression because those have been my areas of focus and study throughout my career. So those are things I post, but I really can't say that I have a strict routine in terms of my posting and projects online.
That's fine. So where can they find you if they want to be a client?
So I do operate privately, and I do operate privately at Set Medical. It's located at Glen Road, Montessori Drive in Glen Road. I have a private practice there. I also work in the public health system, and that's at the Scarborough General Hospital. And I do see patients virtually as well. I have a small number of people that I am seeing virtually currently because of the pandemic as well. And so people could reach out to me. Most of my clients actually reach out to me on Instagram. I am very open to discussion there because I want to make sure, firstly, that, for me personally, I don't want somebody to come and pay for my services and I know I'm not a good fit for them. So I do engage sometimes in conversation, find out what's happening, and then refer appropriately. But if that's an option for you, then you could talk to me on Instagram. I like people, and I love helping people. So, if I have an opportunity to serve, then that brings me great joy, and so that's an option too.
And just to be clear for the public, since you say they reach out a lot via Instagram, what handle is that?
It's Alina, my first name, _S_W.
Okay, so at Alina _S_W.
Yes.
Right? So ladies,
and that's it on Instagram and Twitter.
Sure, no problem. So ladies, I would love to say thank you at this juncture for joining me for the Health, Wellness, and Creativity panel. Thank you so much for answering our call. It was a lovely discussion by all fronts. I enjoyed it thoroughly, hearing the different perspectives. So thank you so much, and I pray you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye. Thanks for having us.
Bye.